Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a session with Tantalus. As mentioned in the invitation, this session is really going to focus on the TRUSense Gateway. If anyone's brand new to Tantalus, I would recommend checking out some of the previous webinars, which you can find on the Adelaide Capital YouTube channel. Even though we're not going to be working specifically off a presentation, this session will contain forward-looking statements. And you can find out more information about what that means on the company's presentation on their website. And it will be mostly a Q&A session, so feel free to enter any questions you have in the box below, as long as they relate to the TRUSense Gateway. With that all out of the way, I'd like to introduce Peter Londa, CEO of Tantalus. Hi, Pete. Thanks for joining us.
Deb, good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. I think this session will be really helpful for investors in just really understanding what the company's been up to the last couple of years with developing the TRUSense Gateway. So maybe you can just start by explaining to us what the TRUSense Gateway is and the genesis of it.
Absolutely. So the genesis, let me start with the second piece of that, Deb. And while we're talking, let me bring up an image that hopefully provide some perspective to what we're going to talk about. So the genesis of the TRUSense Gateway, which is the device that's in the middle of the screen here, and an updated image for that matter as we get closer and closer to finalizing design and prepare for commercialization. But the genesis of what we call the TRUSense Gateway ties to an outreach that we received from a number of the utilities that Tantalus already supports. And through some of our conversations and previous materials, we take a lot of pride in hosting an annual users conference every year. Fortunately, got back to doing that in person most recently. But through those annual users conferences, we conduct surveys, particularly to help us prioritize our product roadmap. And so a couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we had an increasing number of inquiries and requests from utilities that attended our users conference about how to prepare for the impact electric vehicles would have on the distribution grid, how to improve power quality sensing at the meter socket as utilities try to protect transformers and other critical assets across the distribution grid. And so from those inbound inquiries from members of our user community, we decided to formulate an advisory committee. That advisory committee ultimately and today includes a combination of existing longstanding customers of Tantalus, but it also includes a few prospective utilities that had never interacted or purchased anything from our organization. And through that advisory committee, we started to work between our engineering team and our product management team, along with representatives from the utilities on the advisory committee, to come up with what's in front of you here, the TRUSense Gateway. And the intent of this device is really to solve a number of use cases for the utility. And you'll see 4 that are highlighted here on the screen. First and foremost, and I'm going to start top left, we historically helped a number of utilities enhance their metering infrastructure, referred to as AMI or advanced metering infrastructure. And as we've been, from our perspective, ahead of our competition in our market for some time with our Linux-based edge computing platform, dating back to the 2013-2014 timeframe, we started to witness a number of utilities across the United States that have legacy metering deployments where they either don't have the capital budget and flexibility or the regulatory support to start upgrading or enhancing that metering infrastructure. So part of the TRUSense Gateway is to help utilities that may not have purchased our existing AMI capabilities or an advanced system like ours. The second, grid optimization, you'll see in the top right, ties to power quality sensing. As part of the advisory committee, utilities were highlighting the urgency to protect transformers, distribution transformers and pole top transformers. And so through the advisory committee, we started to think about how could we collect data at the very edge of the grid, defined by the electric meter in the utility industry today. How can we start gathering very granular power quality data around current and voltage, and from those two metrics, a few other things, not to get too far into the weeds, that helped us start to then think about, based on changes in that data and based on changes in those parameters, what did it actually mean for protecting assets like transformers? The third use case for utilities in our advisory committee is the bottom left-hand corner here, enhancing broadband value. We have a number of utilities in our user community today that have already or are in the process of deploying fiber all the way to the home to actually deliver broadband services into their communities that may not have prolific or affordable access to broadband services like so many of us have even on today in support of this Zoom. There's a significant portion of the United States and Canada where DSL is still the primary basis of connectivity at home. And so we're seeing an increasing number of utilities access funding, state, federal, or through their own business model plans to ultimately bring fiber all the way to the home for broadband services. And so this device is intended to help that as well. And the fourth case, as I mentioned on EVs, how could we help utilities really understand not only the impact of an electric vehicle or an inverter for storage or solar, but how to actually gain access to those devices behind the meter directly and securely. And so it was the totality of these four use cases, Deb, in conjunction with working with a defined set of utilities that we started to build the TRUSense Gateway. And that journey has been now over 2 years. Order of magnitude of dollars invested is coming up to almost $10 million in the aggregate. So heavy lift on our part, directly correlated into the income statement performance of the company. But as we get closer to commercialization and an opportunity to monetize this technology, from our perspective, it not only is going to change the paradigm and change what utilities can do at the very edge of the grid, but it also should simultaneously change the performance and the trajectory of our business for our shareholders.
And in terms of deployment and commercialization, where are you at right now with TRUSense?
So best to try to show an image, I think, in explaining. Yeah, okay. So some folks that have been tracking us and the progress of this device will see a little shift in this. But in terms of where we stand, we announced a few weeks ago the commencement of field trials for the TRUSense Gateway, while running in parallel with what's referred to as UL, or Underwriters Laboratories certification, which is a safety standard and requirement for devices like the TRUSense Gateway that go into the field and get deployed by utilities on the side of people's homes. And so within the process, we've commenced UL certification for the fiber gateway. Transparently, that certification process is taking a little bit longer than we anticipated. But fortunately, we did have some utilities that were willing to commence formal field trials of the TRUSense Gateway. All members of the advisory committee participated in alpha trials in their laboratories of the fiber and Ethernet gateways. So we've been making some progress dating all the way back to February in terms of understanding what the device can do and what it means for utilities. But in terms of actually getting to a point where we can put this into the field, we do have a few devices at this point in the field while we wait for UL certification. We anticipate UL certification at any moment, and sort of sitting on pins and needles waiting for that to come through. From formal UL certification, that will trigger our ability to actually put this device on the side of people's homes at the meter socket. That's where this device connects for the utilities. And then the meter plugs into the TRUSense Gateway. So it sits between existing meter sockets and any existing meter, whether it's ours or from some other company. And the expectation from our perspective is that we should be able to wrap up all of the testing that we need to do in the field and still get to an available for sale version of the fiber gateway towards the end of this year. We're targeting late November, early December. That may slip either way or get pulled forward by a few weeks on either end. But we're getting awfully close to being at a point where we're activating production of this unit and actually being in a position where we can make it available to utilities to purchase. From there, on the fiber gateway, we expect members of our advisory committee and other utilities that have expressed interest to commence their own field trials of the device. That'll go into looking at what the device can do, the type of data that we access, the connectivity to support broadband services, the connectivity behind the meter to actually get to an EV charger or an inverter and start validating use cases. And from our perspective, field trials for utilities can vary. I think we've got a pretty good perspective, at least as to what members of the advisory committee are thinking about doing. And so our expectation is we start to see an inflection in terms of revenue contribution coming forward here in 2024. I'll highlight the Ethernet and the cellular gateway. So the gray and the green colors, distinguishing, right, three variations of the TRUSense Gateway. The first two, the fiber and the Ethernet, are really applicable for utilities that are deploying fiber all the way to the home. And at this point, there are over 200 utilities in the United States actively deploying fiber. And we think this is a product that ultimately extends and expands the value of that investment that they're making in fiber. The cellular version initially was not part of our development plan. The cellular version of the TRUSense Gateway was in direct correlation to requests that we received from utilities that do not or will not deploy fiber all the way to the home, but wanted 1, 2, or 3 of the use cases, particularly next generation AMI, grid optimization through power quality sensing, and connectivity behind the meter to these different devices like EV chargers, inverters, water heaters, circuit breakers, smart circuit breakers through our partner Savant. And so we think the cellular gateway has much wider applicability, particularly in the investor-owned utility space, where an IOU, an investor-owned utility, would never or very infrequently being deploying fiber all the way to the home. So we think the same platform that we're building for the fiber, with the exception of a few component changes on the Ethernet version, and with the exception on the cellular of actually putting a 5G or private LTE radio and antenna in this device, the base platform, the base software, the base capabilities will all be applicable to every utility that we can interact with across US and Canada.
Okay, and I've got some audience questions. So the first one is there an opportunity for TRUSense to displace traditional smart meters in the market today as opposed to just complementing them?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, a very thoughtful question. What I would say is the TRUSense Gateway has full metering capability embedded through our custom ASIC. It's the same microchip that we put on the modules that we integrate into meters today. And so I think the answer to that question remains to be seen, something that we are contemplating and thinking about. I think it'll also be heavily predicated on a utility's perspective. I would note that today, the TRUSense Gateway does not include the traditional LCD screen that anybody on this call would recognize by looking at the meter on the side of their home, which is a way in which utilities access data, or for that matter, a homeowner could see what looks like hieroglyphics more often than not to the untrained eye. We don't have an LCD screen on this device. I'd also note that while we're at meter grade capabilities, in order to be a metering device, we'd have to run through ANSI certifications, which is a standard for a utility or for vendors like us to ultimately be able to support revenue grade metering. I'd say the functionality is in the device. What you don't see on the screen is the corresponding ANSI certification process, which would be incremental if this device were to replace a meter. Not out of the realm of possibility.
And do traditional smart meter companies offer comparable solutions to help utilities gather data behind the meter?
We've seen 2 of the leading meter manufacturers talk about Wi-Fi connectivity on board within their meter. Big distinction, though. The Wi-Fi connectivity that is envisioned or being communicated as part of a metering platform still is dependent on communicating across a consumer's Wi-Fi network inside the home. So it's just riding like any other device on the consumer's Wi-Fi inside the house. There are a couple issues with that. First and foremost, I'll personalize that. I've just recently got my hands on an F-150 Lightning as our company tries to understand what the true impact of that vehicle and the battery is going to mean for utilities at the meter socket and at the pole top transformer. So I'm a guinea pig in that capacity. And the flip side to that is I get the enjoyment of driving a very cool vehicle. But my EV charger that I've installed on the side of my house is on the complete opposite side and outside of my home. It's on the opposite side where my Wi-Fi router is. And so reliability to the EV charger is a problem over my Wi-Fi in particular. A lot of folks are installing EV chargers inside a garage, and depending on the construction of the home, the location of the garage, the materials in the garage, the equipment that people might store in the garage, that can all degrade a reliable Wi-Fi signal. So that's one issue. Second is cybersecurity. By going over a consumer Wi-Fi network, you're susceptible to cybersecurity threats. The third is, and I like to use my son as an example, he's capable of changing the password on my router at home. I think he's now doing that just to pick at mom and dad every once in a while and get a laugh at our expense. When that happens, and sometimes, we're all guilty of it, even though Apple or our devices try to memorize every ID that we use, sometimes you just don't remember the Wi-Fi password at home. And so you reconfigure your router and change the password, or you do that in normal course for security purposes. If a meter is sitting outside the home trying to tie into the consumer Wi-Fi, and consumer Wi-Fi changes password, if that meter is not reconfigured, the Wi-Fi doesn't work. So what we've done is, in addition to adding Wi-Fi, utility grade Wi-Fi, which is not dependent on consumer technology inside the house, but a Wi-Fi signal from this TRUSense Gateway directly into the home to connect to very specific devices like the EV charger or an inverter. We've also included something called power line communications, or PLC capability. So in my example, going back to my home, where Wi-Fi would be a fairly unreliable point of connectivity to the EV charger on the side of my home, we can send an IP signal through the electric wires of the house. And ultimately, that EV charger does connect to a sub panel, which connects to the main panel in my home. So through our technology, we can send a constant and a reliable signal directly to that EV charger where it does sit outside of Wi-Fi range, or the Wi-Fi range that we've got in the device. So we do see some things, and we see a few metering companies that are similarly trying to get behind the meter. I think they're trying to skin the cat in a fundamentally different way, from my perspective, in a less reliable way. But it's good validation from our perspective that we're very much on the right path to help utilities really redefine the edge of the grid and get behind the meter into the home.
And how large is the TRUSense opportunity versus your traditional AMI market?
Yeah, so we engaged a third-party organization, consulting group, to do an assessment of the market opportunity. I'll talk about the aggregate opportunity and then how that dives down into what we're doing. And from there, what we anticipate seeing convert out of identified opportunities that we're already managing through a sales process. At the highest level, the way this third-party consulting group looked at the market is they looked at it in the aggregate. If every utility put a device like the TRUSense Gateway at every meter socket in the US residential, what would that look like across the market segments of public power, the left set of bars here, rural or electric cooperative utilities, and then investor-owned utilities. The right side, non-traditional energy firms, are development firms that are building small communities and kind of building out their own distribution grid and tying into the utility to substation level. So you can see order of magnitude here is substantial. It's in excess of $100 billion if this were to ultimately end up at every single home, every single meter socket. That's not a realistic scenario, but that's the aggregate total opportunity. From there, we've looked at what is the serviceable available meaning if you looked at all of the meter sockets, what do we think the ratio is of all utilities putting this device into the field? And depending on the utility, the feedback that we're getting is kind of for every 7 to 10 meters, one TRUSense Gateway. That's not applicable for utilities that are deploying fiber all the way to the home, where it would be a 1-for-1 ratio. One fiber connection equals one TRUSense Gateway, so that the meter and everything that the utility has at the house is ultimately using fiber for backhaul. So in utilities that are not deploying fiber, right, the feedback that we're getting is kind of on a ratio of 7 to 1 for every 7 meters, one TRUSense Gateway, all the way up for every 10 meters to one TRUSense Gateway. And so that drives down to what's serviceable, what can we actually access. From there, what do we think we can obtain relative to our sales channel, our position in the market, and for the first time, really pursuing the investor-owned utility market segment with the cellular gateway. And so we've deduced that down order of magnitude, just between $7 to $10 billion of aggregate opportunity that we're chasing. Of that market opportunity, I'll drill down into more specifics. So we have a pretty good sense of our advisory committee, what their plans are, the progress that they're making either on broadband or the progress that they are seeking to make behind the meter. And order of magnitude, the range that we've communicated for Tantalus is in ballpark of $150 to $200 million of incremental opportunity for us to pursue just with the advisory committee. The time frame of that will vary. Some utilities looking to move faster, some utilities looking to move slower. So our view is that opportunity of $150 to $200 million from the advisory committee represents that amount over a 5 to 7 year time frame. Again, some utilities will move a little slower than that. Some will move a little faster than that. Through the initial marketing that we've done of the TRUSense Gateway beyond the advisory committee, so that's other members of our user community or utilities that are just within our realm of marketing and sales approach, there are over 20 incremental utilities that are engaged with us in some form of sales process that are requesting access to field trial equipment. So once we're available for sale on the fiber or available for sale on the cellular, as an example, and the order of magnitude that we see from those incremental utilities, it approximates another roughly $700 million, Deb. So we think we've got line of sight to something north of $750 million already. That's not backlog. That doesn't mean we've got orders in hand for that, but it's line of sight, and I think confirmation and validation on the return on investment we think will deliver, and most importantly, the value that we're going to be bringing into the market with this device. So we think it's pretty accessible at this point. And last but not least, I'd say we are, from the feedback we're getting across the industry, we are first to market. That's the opportunity in front of us. And so our goal is to work as quickly as possible, continue to invest behind this product, get these products, the fiber, the Ethernet, and cellular, into the market commercially between today and Q1 of next year. And then start to benefit from being first in the market and trying to get this entrenched at as many utilities as quickly as possible.
And how do these order sizes for TRUSense compare to your legacy product? Do you anticipate that the order sizes will be much larger? Can you talk about that?
So what I'd say is it's a difficult answer or difficult question for us to answer today, but order of magnitude, this device, the TRUSense Gateway, will be a much more expensive device than our traditional TC module, only because the components, the capabilities, the housing, and the use cases are much more expansive. So we're working to ensure that our pricing is still competitive relative to how a utility would address not only AMI, but how would a utility really and truly track granular power quality sensing capability? How would a utility get behind the meter to control and have visibility into devices and assets behind the meter with their own communications And so when we look at sort of the totality of that, in addition to how would a utility take an existing meter, plug it into our device if there's fiber connected to our device, and backhaul data, right, from that meter on a fiber network. There are no fiber connected meters available in the market today that we've seen. So we're thinking about the pricing. We've been discussing pricing with members of the advisory committee to make sure we've got a pretty good sense as to whether it's in alignment with their views. There'll be some negotiations there, especially as we try to drive volume from the device itself. But order of magnitude, the per unit economics will be higher. With that said, I could see some utilities we're talking to really look at a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning for every meter socket, a TRUSense Gateway. Order of magnitude, that ticket size, that order, larger than what we've historically seen. The inverse of that, I could see utilities using the TRUSense Gateway just for grid optimization and just for power quality measurement, and looking to put one at the beginning and the end of a circuit. So you're looking at a strategic deployment of a handful of these devices around the distribution grid to fortify and protect transformers. In that circumstance, that's not as substantial as a comprehensive or traditional AMI or smart grid investment that we've seen. So I don't mean to tap dance around it. It really is going to depend. We're not in a position to share economics just yet to the broader market. I think we're getting closer where we'll be able to do that and provide some more specific guidance and guardrails as to what we think this means in terms of revenue contribution, as well as price points to the utility itself. But we're pretty excited about what it can mean. Last but not least, Deb, I'm sorry, I've long-winded on your question, I guess on every question for that matter. But within this device, there is the upfront sale of the device itself. The device comes loaded with software that is required to use and operate and integrate this device into our systems or the utility systems. And then on that software license, it's upfront, embedded on the device, there'll be a recurring fee on that software. So hardware component, perpetual software component, maintenance on that perpetual software. So it does align to the rest of our economics in the way in which we've been approaching the utility market in general, where there's an upfront sale and then recurring revenue every year thereafter on the device itself.
Could you compare and contrast your legacy product with the TRUSense Gateway? I mean, it's a question that investors ask in a variety of different ways. But I think that's one issue that we've had in telling the story is that people don't really understand what you had and what you created. So maybe you could just give us
Yeah. So I didn't mean to flip quickly there while you were asking, Deb, but
good.
I just wanted
what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get you. So first and foremost, we very different from meter manufacturers. Mind you, our partners with we partner with meter manufacturers. We compete with meter manufacturers. We have a fundamentally different approach at Tantalus in that the stuff we're building today and the stuff that we're envisioning to build in the future is reverse compatible to previous capabilities, previous devices. Now, with that said, there's certain things we put into the field in 2003. Back in 2003, 20 years ago, the concept of a microchip and silicone, very different than what it is today. So in some circumstances, new applications like our analytics, as an example, can't necessarily be delivered on a device that's 20 years old, but that device still has value. We see a lot of metering manufacturers, right? They come out with a new metering platform. Seems like every 7 or 8 years. More often than not, that new metering platform is not reverse compatible, right? So what does that mean for the utility, particularly one that might have just recently purchased their legacy metering platform months, if not a year or two before new platforms into the market? It's a problem. So relative to legacy, that's some context. The way in which we are supporting reverse compatibility to what we currently do, and I'm sensitive on the word legacy, I understand that reference. At the same token, we're still building TC modules, the module that goes under the glass of a meter, and we are going to continue to build those modules for utilities that are looking to just focus on AMI. What's consistent is the custom ASIC microchip, this little silver flat square. So the same custom microchip that we are delivering today to our TC module is going into the TRUSense Gateway. The same computing platform, the same horsepower, and the same core competencies. That allows us to provide continuity and bridges across generations of technology, which from our perspective is vital, particularly with public power and electric cooperative utilities. And we're even seeing with investor-owned utilities that are not going to get support from regulators to rip and replace a metering infrastructure just because meter manufacturer has migrated to a new platform. So you'll see some continuity. With that said, the TC module that we generate revenue from today, the firmware will be similar to what we put on the TRUSense Gateway. And so for utilities that have purchased and are deploying and using our systems today, they can enhance that system by taking the meter that has our TC module and plugging it into the TRUSense Gateway. The metering capabilities are the same, so there's some redundancy there. But what's different with the TRUSense Gateway is we're taking an existing asset and we're putting it on the same system, and we're enhancing power quality measurement and behind the meter control. Or for utilities deploying fiber, eliminating the need to rely on radio frequency or cellular communications, backhauling all of the data from the meter across a fiber network. And so that is an element on how existing TC module plays with TRUSense Gateway. For utilities that are just focused on AMI, the TC module is still a very competitive, differentiated product from our perspective and still has applicability. So we're not cannibalizing, in our opinion, the opportunity that sits with what drives our revenue today. With that said, there are investor-owned utilities that either are stuck with a near end of life or an abandoned technology system from larger metering partners, but still have mandates or regulatory drivers to improve demand side flexibility, to improve power quality sensing, to get behind the meter to control EVs or inverters for rooftop solar installations like we're seeing in California. And in those circumstances, the TRUSense Gateway is a great way for those utilities to not have to replace the meter, not have to go through that rate case, but ultimately leverage existing meter, plug it into our device, and roll. So, I think we'll see some utilities that have existing metering capabilities. And with that said, the TRUSense Gateway today is not a meter. It has meter grade capability, but it is not a meter. And so that's where there's some complementary nature of what we have historically done to what we will be doing.
Can the TRUSense Gateway plug into any existing meter on the market?
Yep. So I didn't include a visual of it here, but one of our longstanding board members was a gentleman named Dr. Francis Harvey, who long ago worked for Westinghouse, and within Westinghouse was led energy and oil and gas units. And so within that, Westinghouse used to make a meter. And so in a recent board meeting in July, as we were providing demonstrations to our directors in person, we had an old Westinghouse meter. I think it dates back to the 50s. That's 1950s. And we plugged it into our TRUSense Gateway. In that circumstance, the meter still complies with ANSI standards. The TRUSense Gateway is connected to a fiber optic terminal in our office. And so we're metering in alignment with that legacy 1950s device, right? We're actually delivering metering from a 1950s Westinghouse meter over a fiber network today. It's pretty cool if you're in the utility industry. Not so cool, I guess, if you aren't. Why would you touch anything that's from 1950 other than some antique cars or something like that? But it's a pretty neat opportunity for us, and it's something that we're pretty excited about.
One question for you, Pete. Could you give us a real life example of what your technology in the field currently can help a utility with, and then an example of what the TRUSense Gateway can do for a utility? I personally understand things better when I can put it into a real life kind of scenario. So I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. I like to personalize what's happening in my house today, although my house today doesn't have a TUNet or Tantalus AMI system. It's an IOU, investor-owned utility, that's using what is soon to be an abandoned metering platform from one of the larger meter manufacturers. Trying to think about in the context of what we do today. So for the utilities that have deployed or are in the process of deploying our TC module into a meter and then bringing all that data back, what we're helping them do is beyond core metering functionality for billing. We are helping them improve outage management detection. So when is power on? When is it off? We're helping utilities remotely connect or disconnect to a meter with the push of a button on a computer terminal. So instead of having to put someone in a truck, drive down the street, get to someone's home, walk onto someone's property, physically take the meter off of the meter socket to disconnect power, we could do that with the push of a button on a computer terminal. Efficiencies, carbon reduction, workforce safety. Within the TC module, we are capturing very granular data around voltage and current and some frequency information or frequency data points. And so we're helping utilities from our device today pinpoint. For those of you that have met with me, I sometimes hand out little squirrels. Right? We're helping utilities pinpoint where are squirrels chipping away at the insulation on a power line. Where is a tree branch hitting a power line based on microscopic changes in power quality factors that we're able to capture at the module level today. So a lot of what we do is focused on helping utilities automate things for their consumers, educate their consumers, protect assets from the substation down to the home. So what does the TRUSense Gateway do, and what will we expand in terms of what we can do? So not only do everything I just described, from a power quality perspective, we're going to be able to capture through what's called a Rogowski coil, not on our existing TC module, not on the existing metering platforms that we are integrated into today. A Rogowski coil is a coil that sits in this TRUSense Gateway that provides effectively substation quality power measurements. And so we refer to this as advanced power quality measurements, 256 samples per second type data information that we can deliver over a fiber network or on cellular, a 5G or private LTE network eventually with the cellular version. And so it's that much more granular level of power quality sensing through the Rogowski coils that will allow us to get to things like harmonics, the regulation, and a number of parameters that will help more precisely pinpoint where is a transformer truly about to explode or fail. What is the true impact when I plug my F-150 Lightning to charge? What is the impact at that meter socket? What does it mean for the cascading infrastructure that the utility has to manage? So that's one big component, this grid optimization piece. We do some of that today, but we're doing it to the nth degree with the TRUSense Gateway because of what's called a Rogowski coil and then incremental computing horsepower that we're able to put onto this device. The second thing that we will do with the TRUSense Gateway that we do not do today is provide that utility grade secure communication signal into the home to directly control devices. We've had load control switches and still have them that are physical devices that can interrupt, like a relay. Air conditioning is an example, hot water heating, but it's a separate device and it's tied specifically to a handful of applications. The TRUSense Gateway is with our partner Savant on the home energy management side of things. Right, we're going to communicate directly to a circuit breaker level of granularity in terms of control. And so when we think about that, we did some fancy footwork with a utility in Texas a few winters ago when that winter storm came and knocked out wind and other forms of generation and started to take the Texas grid down across the ERCOT footprint. We used remote disconnect meters to rotate homes on, off, to help that utility and that community mitigate property damage, loss of life, serious risk. What we'll be able to do with this device is, instead of all on or all off at a home, reduce the load in the home by 50% with the click of a button to protect an asset, to deal with storms, send a signal down to a hot water heater and preheat that water in anticipation of a storm, pre-charge that vehicle in anticipation of a storm for storm preparation. So the level of granularity, Deb, is just, it's an nth degree more detailed. And then the level of control is an nth degree difference of what we're helping utilities do today.
And what does that mean for the end customer? Why would you, or why would I allow a utility to control devices in my home?
Sure. So there are a couple reasons for that. One of which is the arguably, notwithstanding health issues or family issues, right? One of the biggest inconveniences we all deal with day to day is power outages. It has a ripple effect as we all digitize everything that we do and are more dependent on devices that constantly need to get charged. For me, even personalizing, right? Power outage is really a problem because now my car doesn't work if I haven't previously charged it or can gain power. So for those that have already adopted electric vehicles, right, continuity and reliability of power is critical. So for the consumer perspective, as utilities are making this investment in technology like ours, it simultaneously improves reliability and resiliency. So that is one true benefit to the end user. The second thing that we're doing, and we're working on a few business cases with regulators at the IOU level, is affordability. Right now, a lot of folks in the United States and in Canada today are struggling to pay bills. Where I live in Connecticut, among the highest electric rates in the country. It's a relatively small state, but I think our rates are now, if not the highest, very close to what portions of California are paying. And so affordability is becoming an increasingly important issue in the state of Connecticut. So the more granular control we can provide to utilities, there is a way for them to engage, as an example in Connecticut, with end users, customers, to motivate through time of use rates or to change behavior patterns, particularly for those that struggle to pay their bills. And so from a humanitarian perspective and an affordability perspective, is it better that the utility turns off power entirely to someone who can't pay their bill? Or is it better for the utility to be able to educate the consumer on how much they're actually consuming, on things that they can do differently, on investing in a more efficient water heater if it's electric, or other types of technologies, right, that might mitigate and reduce the amount of power that people are consuming at the most expensive times of the day. So affordability is a second big component. The third thing is economic, right? Beyond affordability, I have an F-150 Lightning. It's one of two vehicles available. Kia makes another one that can physically actually be discharged into the home. It's not vehicle to grid, right? A lot of marketing literature around vehicle to grid. This is vehicle to home, right? It's no different than solar panels and storage, right? I can disconnect from the grid and use the power in the battery of the vehicle that's now sitting in my driveway. And so by doing that, there are some changes with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. California has something called Rule 20, which allows me, if I were in California, or FERC 2222 specific, as that evolves, for me to actually sell power back into the grid. And I'm oversimplifying Rule 20 in California or FERC 2222, but both of those mandates, both of those initiatives are really trying to open up the energy market. And so for me as an individual, if the utility that supports my home purchased a TRUSense Gateway from Tantalus and put it in my meter socket, and by the way, we won't tell them, I'm going to have a sub panel with this device in a meter socket so we can really assess, manage, monitor, and track what that vehicle means for utilities and turn my home into a laboratory. I don't think my wife is aware of that yet, but at some point, maybe she will be, or hopefully she never even is disrupted and has to pay attention to it, but nor my kids. But right, what we'll be able to do is lay the groundwork for homeowners that are investing in solar, that are investing in storage, that are investing in EVs that can discharge back into the home, to monetize those investments through FERC 2222 nationally, Rule 20 in California. And so there's economic, right? This is a mechanism for me as an owner of an F-150 Lightning to monetize that investment in partnership with the utility. So those are, between reliability and resiliency, affordability, and just being more humane when utilities are really struggling, and then economics, right? Being able to monetize investments I'm making at the home. I think those are incentives for customers to engage with the utility and really change the dynamics of, we're not ratepayers anymore. We're actually customers. And in some circumstances, we may be revenue producers within the distribution grid. So I think that's how we see the world evolving, and that's what we think the TRUSense Gateway enables for both utilities and consumers.
Okay. And a couple of audience questions. There was one dealing with competitive advantages of the TRUSense over existing products in the market. I think that you mostly covered that with my case study question. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
I'd say we're only aware of one other device. I'd say we're not aware of any other device that covers all four of these use cases. So 4 birds with 1 stone. We are seeing a device from Tesla that's solely focused on behind the meter control of Tesla EVs, Tesla inverters for rooftop solar panels that they're making, and the Powerwall. From my perspective, phenomenal validation of how important managing these devices behind the meter is. We've seen a private company focused on grid optimization. The device is focused on power quality sensing. And so they're not, from our understanding, UL certified, not commercially deploying at this point, but significant investors that are backing that business just to focus on grid optimization and the importance of protecting transformers and other distribution assets. Our level of sensing is equal to, if not greater than, that device today. And to the question on metering, we're seeing a few meter platforms come up from our partners and competitors that have some improved power quality sensing, not to the level of what we're doing, that have Wi-Fi on board. They can connect over consumer Wi-Fi. We've talked about the traps associated with that and the challenges from our perspective. So there is, some alternative paths, nothing that covers all of this. And then last but not least, we're not seeing any device in the market today that physically connects a meter to a fiber network for backhaul purposes, meaning that the utility, for the first time ever, can really stream meter data across a fiber network. And so as a result, we think we've got substantial competitive advantage with this product and first mover advantage, assuming we can get this into the market in the next couple of months.
And the Tesla product you mentioned, it only integrates with other Tesla products, I'm assuming?
From what we understand from the research that's available or the materials that are available, correct. It's interesting. Tesla kind of took the Apple approach long ago, right? You had to have all Apple products, whereas the PC world went a different direction, opening things up for a lot of different hardware vendors, and then Microsoft Office being applicable on all kinds of different devices. The recent announcement between Ford and Tesla on sharing EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, it's interesting and completely unrelated to Tantalus, but it might be an indication that Tesla is trying to open up their systems and their capabilities to build more of an ecosystem approach. If that's the case, we can play in that space. But from what we've seen with the device that Tesla has been trying to field trial and test a little bit, from our understanding, it's really just focused to their devices, meaning the Tesla vehicle, the Tesla inverter, the Tesla Powerwall. But that's just based on what we can read. I can't speak in more detail to what their organization is doing.
And are the data points collected by TRUSense Gateway not available in existing products on the market?
Not in one unified platform like this across one system. And I'd add, last but not least, another point of differentiation. And to your question on data, we acquired a company called Congruitive, coming up on a year and a half ago. That software platform or that software capability, it is a protocol conversion and translation software. You can think of it like a middleware or middle layer that sits between systems. And so we think that's yet another point of differentiation on accessing, to your specific question, significantly more data than what's available in the market today, and including our own devices, our TC module, and then aggregating, consolidating, storing, and making that data available in a secure manner to an increasing number of systems that utilities rely on every single day. So it's not only are we accessing more data with the congruitive software that will be embedded on this device, we're able to serve that incremental data to a variety of different mission critical systems that the utilities rely on today.
And what's the easiest path to growing software recurring revenue as a percentage of overall sales?
The TRUSense Gateway will have software embedded on it. Mind you, the hardware is going to be X% and software is going to be the balance. When we think about the aggregate, if the question is more about the aggregate revenue composition for Tantalus, in addition to the TRUSense Gateway, we've invested heavily in our data analytics. They are AI-enabled analytics is the way we describe them. So we have certain machine-to-machine capability within those analytics. That's can be sold independent of the TRUSense Gateway or independent of our TC module, assuming that a utility can access the granularity of data that the analytics tool requires, or has a pool of data that the analytics tool that the analytics tool requires. So our analytics package, which we refer to today as our power quality analytics and our transformer monitoring analytics tool, that's a way for us to drive incremental software revenue that's somewhat independent of the hardware sale. The other thing is the acquisition of Congruitive. We are seeing certain utilities that they had as part of their user community that are just acquiring software and will continue to just acquire software and may not need the TC module, may at some point purchase the TRUSense Gateway, but are using that software for a variety of different reasons inside their organization. So that's a way for us to drive more software independent of the hardware platform.
And I had another audience question. Do you anticipate TRUSense Gateway will potentially play a role in virtual power plant by utilities?
Yeah, I do. What we're ultimately going to enable, so I'll give you a real world example. At our users conference, we had the benefit of GE Appliances participating. They brought one of their new electric water heating devices. It is a device that can be preheated when utilities have excess power. And then with a mixing valve technology that they've patented, ensuring that even if the water inside the water tank is 150 or 160 degrees, what actually comes out of the faucet is within plus or minus 1 degree of whatever the temperature setting is by the homeowner. So, most water tanks are set somewhere between 115 and around 115 degrees, give or take a little bit on either side. So in that circumstance, with GE's capability, communicating through a TRUSense Gateway, as an example, we can send a signal to GE's water heater, preheat it to 160 degrees, and then through our TRUSense Gateway, turn off power to that water heater, either at the circuit breaker level or directly at the device level. And then over time, let that temperature come down from the 160 or whatever the max temperature setting the device, the water heater can handle. Over time, let that water temperature come back down to the baseline of 115 degrees as an example. That offset of power to constantly be firing a water heater is effectively thermal storage. And that water heater that GE is in the market with today equates to roughly 4.9 kilowatts of controllable load through the TRUSense Gateway. So if you think about that in a demand management or an energy efficiency program with a utility, deploy the TRUSense Gateway, provide the homeowner with a brand new water heater, potentially at no cost. All of a sudden, the utility has 5 kilowatts of controllable load that they can manage carbon offsets, for reducing their carbon footprint, virtual peaker power plant right there, aggregated across their entire footprint. So yeah, we think we're absolutely enabling a VPP play for utilities in a very, very controlled and direct manner.
And last question, Pete, how is the balance sheet position for the TRUSense ramp?
We secured a debt facility with EDC that we announced at the end of Q2, June 30th. of this year. That debt facility provided us with an incremental $7 million USD of capital to support the working capital that will ramp and fluctuate as we bring the TRUSense Gateway to market, certainly going into next year and as we await orders and from orders, revenue and then revenue cash flow for us. It was non-dilutive capital for our shareholders, sensitive to the fact that we put some more debt on the balance sheet, but it really is to support the working capital needs of the company as we get the TRUSense Gateway commercialized. As we get this commercialized, one of the benefits that we have with our contract manufacturer that will build these devices for us, today we're putting components, long lead time parts on our balance sheet. In the not too distant future, once we are in production of the TRUSense Gateway and available for sale, we'll place orders to the contract manufacturer. The contract manufacturer will put those long lead time parts on their balance sheet. So the working capital requirements are a little bit outside of our historical approach as we're ramping. And we think that EDC facility certainly gives us the ammunition and the dry powder to get through this and to make sure that we're successful in bringing it to market.
Okay, we're just past the hour, but I think a good place to leave things off would be maybe for you to outline some of the news items and catalysts to watch for over the coming months.
Yeah, as it relates to the TRUSense Gateway, I think validating UL certification for the fiber gateway is one that we're very focused on internally. From UL certification, it's the expansion of field trials to get the TRUSense fiber gateway actually installed on homes as opposed to where it is today, utility buildings. From expansion of field trials is delineating that the fiber gateway is available for sale. What that really means, Deb, is the design, that the components are locked, our production through our contract manufacturer activated. We'll consistently make what we do much like people's iPhones with constant upgrades in the background. But I think that available for sale means this design for the fiber gateway is locked. And most importantly, it means we can start to actually receive orders. So those are a couple really near-term UL certification, sort of completion of field trials for Tantalus, activation of orders through available for sale. The Ethernet gateway is, I think, the UL certification. It will follow the fiber gateway. And so as we look into Q1 of next year, full expectation that we have secured UL certification. A lot of what we're doing for the fiber gateway is applicable for the Ethernet gateway with UL. Mechanicals are all the same. Some of the components and energy on the device is a little bit different. So we think we can accelerate the UL certification process as a result of completing the fiber version. For the cellular gateway, we do not need UL certification. It's the exact same platform as the fiber. What we're focused there is working in coordination and complying with FCC requirements. So that'll be a big milestone for the cellular gateway and a gating item to get that device available for sale. So that's sort of looking out over the next 3 to 6 months. UL certification, field trial available for sale and orders on the fiber gateway, UL certification, field trials available for sale on the Ethernet gateway, FCC certification for the cellular gateway. That's all of what's required in order for us to really start changing the dynamics of our business and receiving orders, and most importantly, changing the dynamics of the utilities we support.
Well, Pete, thank you so much for your time, and thanks to the audience for your questions and for participating. I hope this has helped clear up some of the misunderstandings about the TRUSense Gateway and why the company chose to invest in this product. For anyone that would like some more information, feel free to reach out and I can schedule a one-on-one call. And I think it would be good in the coming weeks or months to do another overview of the core business, perhaps maybe after the next reporting cycle. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Deb. Appreciate the questions and thanks to those that sent questions in through the webinar. Have a great afternoon.